Here's an example using the else-if statements. So we start off on line 2 by establishing our variable. We load Samantha B into the variable comedian. On line 4, we have our first condition. We check to see, is it equal to Bill Cosby? And if it is, we alert Bill Cosby. Now in the previous tutorial, I showed how to use an else. So actually it looked like this. I'll go ahead and delete this right here. We just had one else. So if it's Bill Cosby, then it's true, and then it alerts. However, in this case, it's not Bill Cosby, so it would not be true, and it would immediately go to line 8, where we do the else, and that's like the catch-all. So you don't have to have the else. That's not required, okay? You can always just have this condition, but as we saw in the last tutorial, then it wouldn't do anything. So oftentimes, you will want to have else to have another option. Okay. But you may also want to have multiple options, in which case we would have the else ifs. So we start off by having the if, that's always going to be first, and then after that we have our else if. Else if is 2 keywords, and just allows us to check one more time or multiple more times. So you may have it be Bill Cosby, you might want to have it check to see if it's Will Smith, Lucille Ball, Jay Leno, Wanda Sykes, what have you. So we can now go down by using else ifs, and that can just go endlessly. So you would always just check here as you would with the if conditionals, and you would have your check between the opening and closing parenthesis. Note that another thing that we can do here is within our opening and closing parenthesis, we can also check on multiple values. And so that's going to be using the OR operator, which is the 2 slashes here. So I could, for example, check to see if comedian equals, we'll just say Cosby. Maybe someone typed in just Cosby and not Bill Cosby. So that way we could have multiple options. So either comedian or either Bill Cosby or just Cosby, then it would alert. All right. So let's go ahead and run this, and we'll just verify that it's working. And it comes out that says, I'm not sure who the comedia is. So let me correct my spelling here, comedian. Okay, the other way that we can do this too is we can use what's known as switch statements. So let me go ahead and write up a switch statement. I do want to mention one more thing here, is that like I said earlier, we can have the else ifs. You can have as many else ifs as you want, but your last condition, your last thing you're checking on, will always be the else. Okay, so you'll have the if, else if, and then else, and that's the reason for that is because the else is the catch all, and your else technically actually doesn't check on anything. It just is the default when it doesn't meet the above criteria. So if, then else if, and you can have as many else ifs as your heart desires, and then else to catch all. All right, let's do a quick check on the switch. So the switch is going to be similar. What we'll do is we'll use the keyword switch, and then in parentheses, that'll be the variable that we want to check on. So in this case, we want to check on the variable comedian to see what that equals. And then we'll have the opening curly bracket, closing curly bracket, and that establishes our function area. This isn't technically a function, but it establishes our area between the opening and closing parentheses where we'll be checking. We have a keyword called case. And case is just saying, okay, one way to think of it is that in this case, if it is, let's see here. In this case, if it's Tina Fey, let's say, then on the next line, okay, notice that we have this colon here. Then on the next line, we would have an alert. Comedian is Tina Fey. And we'll have a semicolon to close out that line. And after it meets each condition, you want to put a break in here, and that stops the condition checking. So then it won't keep checking anything after this. It just immediately stops, and then it returns back to the program after it performs that line 7. Let me do one more here. Let's say that it might be another case. Let's say Richard Pryor. And if it is Richard Pryor, we have this colon here, and then we want to alert. I'll just say Richard, and semicolon, and then we'll break. And then just like with the else ifs and the else, we need a condition to check on all other cases, and that's going to be the default condition. And we have colon. And then in all other conditions, we have the alert. And in this case, we'll just assume that if it's none of those, then it must be Samantha B. And let me go ahead and bring that up just a little bit so it's a little bit easier to see. So comedian Samantha B, we switch on that value, and then it actually performs the conditions here based on the value within the parentheses of switch, and falls on through, keeps falling through. You always want to have the break, and then as with the else, this would be the default. Let's check it and make sure that it's working properly. So we should have it go down to Samantha B, because that would be our default. Let me actually pull this down a little bit, get this to run. And I'll bring this over so you can see it's, in fact, Samantha B. So that's how we use else ifs, and that's also how we use the switch and case conditionals. Thanks.